Burger King presents Breakfast Stories. Today's story, Marty and the 2 for $4 croissant.
Yeah, I go to Burger King. They got that croissant deal, 2 for $4. It's wicked good with the sausage, dude. And 2 for $4, that is a huge bargain. Huge.
Well said, Marty. Tasty, savory, sausage on a flaky croissant. Hey, this is not breakfast. This is a Burger King breakfast. Get 2 croissant sandwiches now for just $4. Only at Burger King. Price and participation vary.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, folks. It's Chris Daly here, and welcome to a special conversation about everything great happening in Jamaica. It's great to, again, talk with our listening audience, and do we have a special treat for you this evening? We have Dr. Deborah Thomas, who is an anthropologist, and she'll be giving us, exploring some of her research that she's done on Jamaica. She got her PhD in anthropology from New York University in the year 2000, and is currently professor of anthropology and chair of the graduate studies of the Department of Anthropology at the University of Pennsylvania. She's also affiliated faculty with the Center of Africana Studies and as a secondary appointment with the Graduate Study of Education. She's a member of the graduate groups of Africana Studies and English. Prior to an appointment at Penn, she spent 2 years as a Mellon postdoctoral fellow at the Center of Americas at Wesleyan University and 4 years teaching in the Department of Cultural Anthropology at Duke University. She is the author of An Exceptional Violence, Embodied Citizenship in Transnational Jamaica, Modern Blackness, Nationalism, Globalism, and the Politics of Culture in Jamaica, and is co-editor of The Globalization of Race, Transformation in the Cultural Production of Blackness. To conduct the interview is my co-host, Janice Maxwell, and she'll be exploring this great work from Dr. Thomas. Take it away, Janice.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Deborah.
Hi, Janice.
Well, as you know, March is Women's History Month, so we're really honored to have such an outstanding woman of your caliber, a filmmaker, and all the other positive attributes you have to celebrate womanhood. So,
I'm honored to be on with you.
Tell us a little about your cultural roots. You know, where do you hail from?
Well, I grew up all over. My father is Jamaican. My mother is American from Wisconsin. And we lived in Jamaica for several years during my early childhood, and other than that, mostly grew up in different parts of the U.S. I live in Philadelphia now, which is where I teach at the University of Pennsylvania. But spent, many, many years in New York, in Brooklyn, went to high school. My parents are still in Minneapolis, so I'm sort of one of these people from all over.
I see. Your book, Exceptional Violence, Embodied Citizenship and Transformational Jamaica, this is your second book that you have done on Jamaica. The first being Modern Blackness, Nationalism, Globalization, Politics and Culture in Jamaica. Was it because of your upbringing in Jamaica that drew you to this?
Partly, yes. I also, prior to graduate school, I was a professional dancer, and the company that I danced with in New York, we did these sort of community residencies where we would work with different grassroots organizations in communities on a long-term basis, using dance and music as a tool for social change. And that was in addition to our performance schedule, our touring schedule. And I just became interested in, we were working at a very local, like a very grassroots level, and I wanted to know, what kind of impact can artists have, and particularly performing artists who are working from like a cultural position, what kind of impact can they have on development and nation building and things like that. And since artists and dancers in particular were very involved in the anti-colonial cultural movement, cultural nationalist movement in Jamaica, it just made sense to go back and do sort of my PhD research there, and that's what led to that first book.
Yeah, I see. So tell us how you decided on this Jamaican experience to be your subject of study. The dancing?
You mean the second book or the first book?
Mm-hmm. Second.
The second. Well, I actually had started working on a different project, on a project about the women who leave Jamaica and go to work in hotels in the U.S., because a number of my friends had come up on that hotel workers program, which is like the farm work program, only it's, obviously in the hospitality industry. Mm-hmm. But things started happening in the neighborhood where I used to live, and a very close friend of mine was ultimately killed in what was developing as a gang war, and the friend of mine was somebody who wasn't involved. They were coming for his gun because he had a licensed firearm. And so after that I just, started looking into different aspects of violence in Jamaica more generally. I mean, violence is something that everybody lives with in Kingston, and it's sort of structures how you move in a day-to-day kind of way, but I had never really explicitly written about it, and this thing that happened in the community and my friend's death sort of catalyzed the project in general, and one thing led to another, and that's how we get the second book. Yeah.
I see. Were Jamaican scholars involved in the study?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I work with scholars at the University of the West Indies, and read their work and have been in discussion with them, for decades. So, yeah, definitely. It's a topic obviously that everybody is interested in one way or another, and a number of people who are in the social sciences at the University of the West Indies have written about and tried to think about and really understand what that history is and what it has to do with politics and what it has to do with colonialism. And so, I mean, I think we're all part of a big community of scholars who are looking at the same thing.
I see. Well, why don't you give us a summary of your major findings?
In the book? Well, I became troubled, I guess, by the way that people talk about violence in Jamaica. And it's not limited to Jamaica. I mean, I think people talk about violence among black people anywhere in the same language, which is to say that we have a culture of violence. That somehow this is something that's related to a cultural defect, or, it's something that we pass down from generation to generation. And that's how people talk about poverty also. And in the U.S., that whole discourse about the culture of poverty vis-a-vis African Americans which arose in the 60s in policy, but has certainly continued since then, and has been critiqued very roundly, but somehow that kind of talk about stuff doesn't really go away. And so I wanted to think about what would it mean to look at violence as something other than a cultural attribute, to really investigate the history and think about older patterns of violence during colonialism and how those resonate today, and the structural legacies of that history of colonialism and conquest, and what that means for today's inequalities in Jamaica, the development of political parties, all of that, and try to argue that, in fact, violence is not a cultural condition, that it's the result of structural factors that can be tracked, and that we need to take a much longer historical view to understand, what's really going on today.
Right. Yeah. And because of that, are there any stereotypes of subcultures that cast a big footprint on our understanding of a wider culture?
Well, sure. I mean, I think dancehall culture is stigmatized, certainly, just the same way hip-hop culture is here. Go ahead.
It's interesting you could say that, because, say, early hip-hop say in the 70s or in the early part of the 80s, it wasn't very. It was very positive. It talked about elevating black women, you're my African queen and all that. But then suddenly suburban white males in particular started to purchase it. And then if you notice, it took on something else.
Yeah.
It was very, very negative. And considering the fact that most of those white boys do not have any real association in the inner cities of Chicago, wherever, they just have an image, and it's like, oh, yeah, I'm bad, and I listen to rap music, you know. But one of your solutions is reparations. That's a very touchy subject, you know, it's reparations among black Americans or even Jamaicans. You know, please define the scope and context of this solution, and why do you think it has any viability?
Okay. You sound cynical. Yeah, well, I mean, I think what I advance in the book is to use reparations as a framework for understanding the place of the past and the present, because that's what reparations activists really do, right? They track certain historical divisions from an originary moment to the present in order to show what is the legacy of, for example, the slave trade, or in other cases the use of Korean women as comfort women for Japanese soldiers, or the killing of Jews during the Holocaust, or they're able to sort of use that kind of structural historical framework to think through.
I see that, but would it be a monetary price? Because I remember when they did, you mentioned the Japanese. Well, Japanese Americans, they suffered too. They went into the concentration camp. Well, in the U.S. And a couple of years ago, they were getting $20,000 apiece. I don't think, could you really put a price on what a human being suffer? Black people, especially, because they still suffer from post-traumatic slavery. And that's why there was I sounded cynical, because blacks don't have an economic base in this country. So you can't go into any concentration of black people in the U.S. This is the U.S. You can find a Chinatown or a Koreatown, even a Jewtown. I live in Chicago, and they actually had a place called Jewtown, right? Where black people live, they don't own the economics of that community. So even if you were to give them money, it would go right back into the hands of basically Koreans and Arabs and all. Every other group is going to benefit from that money. Black people aren't going to get it. So why would you say reparations would be a good idea if you're going to be getting money and it's not even going to stay into the community because they don't have an economic base?
Yeah, well, I'm not really using the term actually in that way. I'm not talking about it literally. Obviously, activists who are interested in reparations for slavery are trying to think about it in terms of a monetary compensation, but that's not the way that I'm using it in the book. I really am using it metaphorically to understand that process of thinking through, the how we get to today, how we get to A, to B from A, and what, to discount all of those people who want to talk about inequality as if it's a personal individual failing rather than a structural historical problem, And so when I'm using the word reparations in the book, I'm really using it as a framework for thinking, not as a literal movement. However, in the last chapter of the book, where I'm talking about Rastafari and state violence against Rastafari, and one incident in particular in 1963, what's called the Coral Gardens incident, we did a film that came out of that chapter. And as the film has traveled a little bit, it's caught some attention, and it caught the attention of Jamaica's public defender, who is now finally pursuing a case and an investigation of what happened in 1963, because one has never been done, with the aim of developing an actual reparations case against the government of Jamaica. Now, in the community then, it means they're trying to think about what that could mean for them. You know, is it that like they don't want to necessarily only think about it as this kind of, you know, individual monetary compensations, right? But to instead imagine what kind of thing would benefit the development of the community as a totality, you know, into the future. And so they're trying to sort of imagine, I think, very creative and innovative ways of thinking about, you know, what reparations could be in that context. Not just that everybody would get, you know, $1,000 US or even $20,000 US, but actually that they could instead imagine something that would benefit the development of the community as a whole, whether through policy or programs or, you know. So I think it doesn't have to mean, you know, like money that's going to continually circulate back into the hands of power. I mean, the issue that you raise is very important also because, you know, usually when states pay reparations for something, they don't want to hear about it anymore. Right. You know, for them, the problem is finished. So
they may not want to, but it depends on who it is, because Jewish people, Germany will have to pay Israel for a very long time, and they can say they don't want to hear about it, but their mantra is never forget. And not only is it never going to never forget it, we will remind you every year. And they do remind everybody every year. You know, but where have you presented your findings, and what has been the response?
Well, lots of places. Universities mostly. In terms of the film, we've shown it all over. I'm going to be in Toronto this week coming. I was in Amsterdam a couple weeks ago. I went to the Trinidad and Tobago International Film Festival, Hollywood Black Film Festival, San Diego Black Film Festival. Also showing it in little community spaces as well as sort of university classes. And it's been really interesting to see the different ways that people respond to it. Certainly in Jamaica, you know, a lot of Jamaicans didn't know about this incident in 1963. So, and in fact, a lot of younger Rasta don't know either.
And it also depends on who's controlling the media, because that has a lot to say.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Who controls the media and what's being presented? Because they're not knowing about this. That's deliberate, isn't it? You know?
Yeah, it's not. You know, it doesn't fit nicely and neatly into the kind of, you know, story of Jamaican independence and nationalism. So yeah, it's largely been untold.
Right. And there are other cultures with similar histories that have manifested different pathology. What is the ingredient in the Jamaican sauce that is the major causative factor?
It's the major cause of?
Causative factors in terms of, like, you know, what's happening in Jamaican culture that makes these kind of pathologies exist. You know, we're not the only ones that are violent. We're not.
Yeah.
But you don't see that. What's making Jamaica unique? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't think Jamaica is unique. I think, you know, there are a number of structural factors that lead to what the situation is today. You know, certainly one of, you know, primary among them is colonialism and the various ways institutions were set in place by the colonial government that, you know, mandated how land was distributed, how people had access to sort of economic development, political participation, all of those things you can sort of track through time, what it meant to become a crown colony in 1866, you know, the whole sort of development, you know, dependent development of colonialism. But also, you know, the development of political nationalism in Jamaica took a particular path, and political violence accounts for most of what people see today, I think, as the sort of primary divisions among the poorer people in Jamaica. Those political divisions have sort of factioned off as a result of the international drug trade. And, of course, Jamaica is a primary transshipment point for cocaine coming from South America and particularly Colombia. So there are a lot of factors that, that are sort of global, structural realities. What?
Currently, Jamaica is going to have their 50th anniversary of quote-unquote independence.
Yeah.
So we're, quote-unquote, free from colonialism. But I think there's neo-colonialism on the island. What's your take on that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you can't erase the past, it definitely lives on. I mean, certainly there's all kind of colonial legacy. I mean, Prince Harry, I was just there last week and Prince Harry visited, and the amount of, excitement and kerfuffle around this 27-year-old young man's visit was just incredible, But that's, again, the legacy of colonialism. I think, Portia Simpson, the new prime minister, is talking about moving toward Republican status. Now, that would then remove the Queen as head of state and remove the Privy Council, the British Privy Council, as the highest court in the land, and it instead would direct Jamaica, under the jurisdiction of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Symbolically, I think that would go far to change, kind of, I mean, there's no reason we still have to say God Save the Queen in school every day, Yeah. So I think, those are the ways colonialism still lives on in the present. But, of course, we also, live in a global economic system that's dominated by, the U.S. at this point and various up-and-coming, powers like China and India and Brazil. And so I think, the different kinds of global inequality persist.
A work like this does solicit critics. What has been the major counter-argument, and what has been your response?
Counter-arguments to
the movie, your book, things of that nature.
Well, I haven't heard any yet. I suppose as people start reviewing it, maybe I would the book anyway, I would hear one or two things. In terms of the film, I mean, it's a documentary, and it's documenting, the experiences of the elders who went through that persecution in 1963. So there's nothing really to, criticize.
To remind
I suppose.
You of like I said earlier, how it's covered over because they don't want people to think about or remember the past in such a negative way. So the fact that you're reminding people of what happened, I thought people would have been like, don't talk about that, don't get people all worked up.
No, not really. I mean, nobody in Jamaica, and at least nobody that I've heard. I mean, I think in the community, in the Rastafari community, outside the Rastafari community, in sort of the group of artists and intellectuals I know in Kingston and, more professionals, people who did not know are glad to know. And the response has been very positive, and certainly within the community, the response has been very positive. I have heard that, what you're saying, but it was from somebody in Amsterdam, actually, who was Dutch and had lived in Jamaica for a number of years, working with a company there, I think married to or living as married with a Jamaican woman, who felt like, why stir this up? Jamaica isn't like that anymore. It's not, it's the same kind of people here who would want to say we're in a post-race moment. Look, we have a black president, so we must be post-race. Is that kind of position, like, why are you still, talking about this?
I think it's just wishful thinking or delusion of inclusion whenever people say that to me. But, tell us a little bit about the movie and what's the intent of using this medium to get the word out.
Oh, well, as I said, it didn't start out as a movie. It was, part of the book, and talking with some of the elders, for the chapter that I was writing, and it really was the idea of one of the elders, because I had asked him if he would retrace his steps with me and tell the story again as, we walked through the landscape and show me, where he was chained to somebody, where they were thrown into the back of a Jeep, where they were taken to jail. And he said, well, yes, I could do that, but wouldn't it be better to do it on film? And I was like, well, yeah, everything is better on film. And my husband is a filmmaker, so it was kind of easy to imagine that it could be possible. And so there were three of us who really worked on it, and Junior, the other collaborator, Junior Wedderburn, went with me, did all the filming, tracked people down. John Jackson, my husband, edited it, and we worked very closely with Junior Manning, who is no longer alive, but at that point he was chairing the group in Jamaica that does the annual commemoration of these events at Coral Gardens in 1963. So he was running around with us and looking for people and sort of paving the way for us to be able to do this. And I think his agenda was to just get the word out, so that people can know, what happened. I think a lot of people are interested in Rastafari, and they come to Rasta because of the music, and especially people outside of Jamaica. They come to Rasta because they like what they hear, of Bob Marley's lyrics and other people's lyrics. But they don't really know the history, and they don't know how persecuted, that community has been, was in the early years, really up through the 80s and 90s, and people don't know. So,
it is interesting that Rastafarians is now a selling point for the tourists, and before it was a completely different image. So what is on the near horizon for you in regards to further research in Jamaica?
Well, we're going to run around with the film a little bit more. But, I'm still just interested in questions of the political, what's going on with the 50th anniversary this year? How are people seeing, what's possible, what the openings are, how they could change things for themselves, and what's going on. So that's what I'm paying attention to.
Yeah, I see. Well, to learn more about Jamaican Diaspora, visit Jamaican Diaspora. To learn more about Chris Daly, his website is Let's Get Social and Mobile. And, Deborah, if someone would like to see that movie, how would they do that?
Well, they could go to our website, which is www.badfridaythemovie.com. And all the information is there, the information about the film, how to buy the film, how to get in touch with us, everything is there.
And the trailer is on that website as well. So
there's a trailer on the website,
right?
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, we definitely appreciate you spending some time with us, and
Progressive presents Mindfulness with Flow.
Your aura brims with confidence. The Name Your Price tool has given you policy options based on your budget. A source of great power rises from within, like a Tyrannosaurus Rex that can shoot dragons out of its eyes, riding on a tank.
Get insurance based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Boar's Head invites you to enlighten your senses. Introducing Boar's Head Ichiban Teriyaki-style chicken. Inspired by Japanese master chefs, our signature teriyaki glaze is crafted with garlic, ginger, and a hint of brown sugar, then paired with our tender, slow-roasted chicken breast for a flavor that's sweet, savory, remarkably bold. Boar's Head Ichiban Teriyaki-style chicken, the bold flavor of Japan, now at the deli. Compromise elsewhere.